Morning, Dennis.
Morning or evening, I should say, in my case. One day I will get that rhythm
Dennis,
down.
Dennis, it's the name of the show.
I
You got
know.
to
I
figure
just
it
got
out
to
at some
yeah,
point.
I
I
know.
mean, I'm going to give you till our 1 year anniversary. At
That's
that
what,
point,
how many episodes is that? Five a week?
three, oh, five times 52, right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
110.
I
Yeah.
was told there were one of
But
my favorite Moshisms when we used to work together is I was told there would be no math.
I just used that yesterday. I don't want to claim too much credit for that one because that is from one of my prior favorite podcasts was Matthew Berry, who does fantasy football. And, I'm a huge adherent to the
Mm-hmm.
fantasy of football. Nothing like pretending to manage a team that doesn't exist for like 16 weeks, 17 weeks of your life and having it consume everything. You know what I mean?
It's like having an
So
unpaid job. I don't understand.
yeah, yeah. That you do for fun and stay up work overtime constantly on, right? Um, so I wanted to finally pull in my very favorite philosopher of all time.
Oh,
You know me well, Dennis. Who do you think my favorite philosopher of all time is?
which which time lord is it? which of the
Oh, he got it. He got it. It is the Doctor, and it is the fourth, in this case, the fourth incarnation. One of my, and he's got great quotes. And trust me, we're going to go through a lot of them.
oh boy, all
But
right.
yesterday's conversation really got me thinking about our perspective on learning and growth. We talked about failure and this fear of failure and how there's a culture, this indoctrination again, I want to speak for U.S. schools, and so like that's about the school of we must avoid the mistake at all. Mistakes are fatal, right? And one of the other perspectives I think is great is in the serial The Face of Evil, the Doctor, who, if you watch the show, is always asked for question after question. What about this? What about that? He or now she, I should say, chronically the smartest person in the room, right? But great quote. Answers are easy. It's asking the right questions, which is hard.
Hmm.
I think there's a version of this. I still remember like a Dr. Seuss type quote here. Another great philosopher, by the way. But that what always stuck with me from The Face of Evil. Also, the introduction of one of my favorite characters, Leela. Answers are easy. It's asking the right questions, which is hard. And I did this stint as a teaching assistant after I graduated
Mm-hmm.
from university, and this quote typifies so much of how I felt about reflecting on a young Mashi in school and just after school, and even through law school, and interacting with students at the university level. All they wanted were answers, and not only that, but when they found an answer, they clung to it. And
Mm-hmm.
it was never the question when engaging with a lot of thought and rhetoric and knowledge is very rarely when you're young. Man, this is great. How can I adopt this? This person really got it right. We tend to, I would say, at an immature level, start steering towards, Socrates. Well, let me sit here and think about everything Socrates got wrong. Let me sit here and pick apart.
With 2,000 years of hindsight.
Right. It's like let me sit here. Happiness is the greatest thing. The unexamined life is not worth living. Let me pick apart Socrates. Aristotle, he's not even as old as Socrates. If I can take down Socrates, I can take down Aristotle. And there's this. What we forget is you already hit it here. There's a reason we've been reading him for 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
He got a lot right. In fact, I'm also a huge adherent to Socrates. So, in fact, he got most of it right. And when we're young and immature, we don't steer towards really accepting that answers aren't the end. Finding the question, and as an older person now, I look back and I reread some of these things that I read, whether they're mystery novels, which I'm going through right now, or Socrates, or any of those things, and all of a sudden, I'm asking different questions when I read it. It's a totally different frame of context, and I think now, God, I hope now. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to say I'm asking the right questions now. I'm getting closer and closer to asking.
Would you say you're asking better questions?
Yeah.
Or more
asking
questions,
better questions,
maybe.
more relevant questions. And yeah, I mean, you've read The Hitchhiker's Guide. Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what's the meaning of life? Well, here's the answer. Great job, right? What is it,
Yeah,
40,
yeah.
43?
42.
42? God, am I
42.
42. Okay, so I'm past it. So
Yeah, you overshot. I agree. I
yeah.
think and in a professional context, that is so important, especially and when we talk about, you and I both work in marketing, we talk a lot about data and metrics, and there's that old adage that you can make statistics prove whatever you want, but asking the right question and trying to figure out why you're asking something. And we talked a little bit about why and how yesterday. That's what's really key, and that's true in your personal life as well. And when you're trying to figure out how you want to approach a problem, or how you want to live your life, or if you want to make a change, or things like that, asking yourself the right questions is often more important than the information you're actually looking for.
And Dennis very appropriately steered us back towards that, away from Doctor Who, which maybe that's not appropriate, but back.
I got to keep one hand on the wheel at all times.
No, it's true. It's true. But back towards this idea of business and marketing in particular. But even when we conflate it out, we watch the growth of culture, or we watch the expansion of our business, and this, we talked about trying to learn from our successes versus our failures the other day. We ask different questions when we're successful and when there's a failure. I think we're a bit better actually at honing in on failure because we're so obsessed with it. We are less obsessed with success. There's this way where when your plans go right, you're like, well, of course they went right. I planned it that way. Now, why wouldn't they go to according to plan? And it's like, okay, I've lived long enough to know that the best laid plans, right? If you want to quote. But
there's this framework that I've encountered at work a couple of times that's quite popular that Spotify came up with, called the thoughtful execution framework. And it says, DS, if you have a goal you want to achieve and you have all the information around it and the insights you have, and then from that, you try and identify problems and opportunities. And then based on every single one of those, you identify a hypothesis, which is going to tie right back to your love of Greek philosophy. You identify a hypothesis, and then some of those hypotheses will bear solutions that you go and implement and you do. And in the case of marketing, you run a campaign, you try and do this, you try to target people differently. And then the last step, and often the most important one, is learning. And like you said, not learning just from failures, but also learning from successes. This worked, why? This didn't work, why? We're very quick to ask this didn't work, why? Because somebody's going to answer for like a budgetary requirement for it.
Yeah.
But this worked, why? Is a lot trickier. Is a lot trickier to care about, because often you just go, great, do it again.
And you keep running it through until you do stub your toe, right? And at that point, you probably do a closer look at why you stubbed your toe this time, but not the last three. And then you start to ask, maybe you're starting to ask the better questions, the right questions.
We talked about that a lot when we were together with, I would often talk about PPC marketing on like paid social marketing on like Facebook or on Twitter, like mining, where you find a rich vein of some mixture of copy and offer and audience targeting that works. And you mine it until you've reached all the people that you could possibly reasonably reach at the cost you're comfortable with. And then you go try find a new one, and you mix things up. You try this thing, you try a different targeting strategy, you try a different asset, you try a different product, all this kind of stuff. It is like being an old school gold prospector at times.
I love the idea, especially coming from the city of you in that 49er garb with the hat and a pickaxe out there mining all of our audience. But I think it is the question we always ask, right? When we have different outcomes, and when you're doing it right, even the successful outcomes you're doing this for, you always ask yourself, like, how do we get here? What's the question? The answer is we have a successful campaign. The questions being, how do we get there? What do we do? What moves do we make? Why this campaign? Those are all the questions we engage with, and that's what this quote typifies for me. Every point we arrive at in our lives, professionally, personally, that's today's answer. That's who we are today. That's where we are today. That's what we're doing today. That's where business is at today. That's where sales are at today, right? Why? What questions are we asking to justify in our own mind? Because we justify a lot, personally and professionally, why things are going well, and particularly why things are going poorly. What questions are we asking there? What dialogue are we having? And this is the other boogeyman is like, the blame game of if you're not asking that question, often you're like, well, I'm not going to ask myself that question. Sales are down, and by God, that's Dennis's fault. And let's just leave it at that. The very dangerous game. You're not asking the right question then. But I think what this really comes down to is the answers to questions, the answers to our quandaries. And I think, again, culturally, we're indoctrinating the idea that is the end. But it's really the beginning of it, right? The answer, when you have the answer you're looking for, and you know this from business, from marketing, when you have the answer you're looking for, that's really the start. Because then you start to say, how do we get this answer? How did I get this? This is what I was looking for the whole time. How did I get there so I can get there again and again and again in this company and that company with this campaign and that campaign and this endeavor? All those things build on the idea that you're not satisfied with the answer. You're always asking the right question to get that answer again or a better answer next time. I think go ahead.
I was going to say, I think an essential thing to think about is, when you mentioned it earlier, when you succeed, it's very difficult to be retrospective about it, right? And something that I teach a lot whenever I teach marketing is to say, when you find something that hits or find something that is successful, if you feel like you can't, and ask yourself, like you mentioned, of course this worked. Everything planned out exactly the way I drew it up. is imagine yourself in a scenario where you encounter exactly the same situation again. Would you do literally anything differently? And the answer is always, there's always going to be something you do differently with hindsight, right? And it might be tiny. It might be, oh, I actually wouldn't have. It often will be, I wouldn't have bothered trying this thing. I would have gone straight to this thing. It's like, okay, great, that's a new starting point. So I think it's very, like you said, it's very, very easy to critique failures and very tempting to sort of ascribe successes to sort of natural talent, or of course I did it right because I intended to.
So, what questions do you think right now you're not asking? That was my stinger today because
That's a tough one. That's a loaded one. I think a lot. I alluded to this the other day that I think I'm bad at and I mentioned today I'm bad at taking gratitude for what I have currently in my life. Very similarly, I'm very bad at retrospecting. I think a lot of the time, I'm much more focused on I'm doing this thing. What am I doing next? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? And I'm not asking what did I do wrong here? What would I do differently if I had information I had now? What could I have changed? Could I have handled these things better? I think, and that sort of like end of the day or end of the week or end of the month or whatever is retrospective, I think is something I'm definitely missing.
And so here's the key, because you really have, it's a two-part quote. Answers are easy, ask the right questions are hard. And we spent most of this, I think, on the second part very rightly. But I want to suggest to you and to everybody, one of the other stepping stones here is answers are easy. Once you find yourself asking the right question, answers are easy. So ask the right questions. That's the hard part. That's the tricky part. Answers are easy. Once you've asked the right question, you are moving towards finding that answer, right? What happens
by virtue of the work you've done and deciding that's the right question, you're already driving towards the answer.
There you go. And that's why I love the quote, right? I love the quote because we've gone through the journey I always, I went through, which is oh my God, you're right. We're not asking the right questions. How do we answer the right questions? What are we examining? How do we critically look at blah, 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 blah? That's great. Do that. That's important because that's what we don't do enough of. But always remember the answers are easy. That's the key. Now, framing the question more exact and, I really should go to the gym more. Yeah. Why don't I go to the gym more? Oh, I don't like the gym. Okay. That's not where you want to go. Right. You gotta go. You gotta dig deeper than that. For me, I like going to the gym. I like the ritual. I like the feel of it. It's a space for me where I'm not social, even though I'm habitually a social person. I'm very focused in. I call myself a gym ninja. I have a mask, and a headset. I don't talk to anyone. I just boom, boom. I time everything, and I like that ritual. It really appeals to me, and I like working out. It makes me feel better when I'm eating all these French fries and McFlurries. But I think focusing on getting that right answer or getting that right question is incredibly important. Ask the question. Questions are hard. That's the work. But the silver lining of that is answers are easy. Once you're asking the right question, you want answers.
How do you reconcile that with what we talked about the other day about not worrying too much about having things perfect?
Oh my God, it's look, the hidden subtext here is the journey is the answer. Right?
Sure.
Is that finding the right question gets you 9/10 to the answer you're looking for, and that's just it. Being wrong is all about finding the wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cares about that. All we're imploring you to do is ask the right question and then go on that journey to seek an answer. Right? It turns out, Dennis, the real answer is all the friends.
Those are the friends who made along the way.
Exactly.
All right. On that note, good evening. Have a good morning, Mash. I'm out.
Have a great evening, Dennis. Until next week. We're off tomorrow.
Next week. We're off tomorrow.
Week. Yeah. Have a good one. Be wonderful to yourself. Be wonderful to each other, as I often say. So.
Oh.